King Arthur, Merlin, King Lear. You know these names. They feel like they've been around forever, right? They're these pillars of legend, tales of magic, heroism, and incredible tragedy. But what if I told you that a huge, huge part of what we think we know about them, all these stories that have captivated us for almost 1,000 years, well, what if they all sprang from the mind of just one man and from the pages of one single extraordinary book?
So that's the big question, isn't it? Where did the legend of King Arthur, the one we all know and love, truly begin? Now, you might be thinking it was pieced together from old folklore, whispers around the fire, maybe a few ancient poems. But the real answer is, well, it's a lot more deliberate than that. It's an invention. And we're about to see exactly how the epic story of Britain's greatest heroes was literally forged into existence.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to travel back to the 12th century to find the source. First up, we'll look at the book itself, the Book of Legends. Then we'll explore how it created the original story of King Lear. From there, we'll witness the incredible, magical debut of Merlin. After that, the main event, the rise of King Arthur. And finally, we'll wrap up by asking a pretty big question. What does it mean when a nation's most cherished history is actually forged from myth?
Okay, so our story starts around the year 1136 with a Welsh cleric named Geoffrey of Monmouth. He writes this book with a really grand, ambitious title, History of the Kings of Britain. Now, Geoffrey made a pretty bold claim. He said he was just translating a much, much older, lost book. But the truth is, he was doing something far, far more creative. I mean, just listen to his opening lines. This tells you everything you need to know about his goal. He's not writing some dry, dusty chronicle of events. No, he's painting a picture of a promised land, an almost mythical paradise. Right from page 1, he's setting the stage not for simple history, but for a grand, sweeping epic. He's presenting Britain as a land of destiny, just waiting for its heroes to arrive. What Geoffrey created is something we now call pseudo-history. Think of it like this. He took little bits of real events, a few scraps of Welsh folklore, and then added a massive dose of his own incredible imagination. He wove it all together into this grand narrative. And why? Well, his goal was to give the British people, who were, at the time, still reeling from the Norman conquest, a heroic past that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the legends of ancient Rome. He was giving them a unifying story they could build a new identity on. All right, let's dive into our first big case study from his book. Now, long before Shakespeare ever picked up a pen to write his famous tragedy, Geoffrey of Monmouth told the story of a king named Lear. It's a powerful tale about a father's foolishness and a daughter's loyalty. But you'll see, Geoffrey's version has a very, very different ending. So the story kicks off with this really ill-fated test of love. King Lear is getting old, and he wants to divide his kingdom among his 3 daughters. But first, he demands that they prove who loves him the most. His 2 eldest, Goneril and Regan, laid on thick with these gushing, over-the-top speeches. But his youngest daughter, Cordelia, the one he loves the most, she refuses to play the game. She just offers the simple, honest truth of her love, nothing more. And Lear is furious. He completely disowns Cordelia and splits the kingdom between the other 2. Big mistake. It turns out their words were nothing but lies. Goneril immediately starts complaining about his knights and forces him to shrink his retinue. Humiliated, he goes to Regan, who's even crueler, telling him to get rid of all but 5. And then, the final insult, he's told he can stay, but only with a single attendant. Just like that, he's a beggar king, totally stripped of his power and his dignity.
So, completely desperate, Lear flees across the sea to find Cordelia, the very daughter he cast out. She's now married to the king of the Franks, and when she hears about her father's state, she just weeps. She secretly sends him money and fine clothes, gets him a new retinue of knights to restore his honor, and only then does she and her husband officially receive him. They don't just take him in, they raise an army, they invade Britain, and they crush the treacherous sisters in battle.
And here's the twist. In Geoffrey's original telling, this story has a happy ending. Lear is restored to his throne, and he rules for 3 more years and dies peacefully. It's a story about justice and redemption. It took another 450 years for Shakespeare to get his hands on it and transform it into that absolute heartbreaker we know today, where both Lear and Cordelia die. All right, from royal family drama, we are now diving headfirst into magic. Before Geoffrey's book, Merlin was kind of a mysterious, shadowy figure in Welsh folklore. But in the history of the kings of Britain, he explodes onto the scene and becomes this central character, a master of prophecy who literally shapes the destiny of the entire kingdom. The story starts with this tyrant king, Vortigern, who's trying to build a giant tower. But there's a problem. Every single night, the ground just swallows up the day's work. The foundations keep collapsing. So his court magicians come up with this horrifying solution. They tell him he has to find a boy who never had a mortal father and sprinkle his blood on the foundation. A truly dark and bizarre plan.
While the king's messengers actually find such a boy, and his name is Merlin. But when they bring him before the king to be sacrificed, Merlin just laughs at the magicians. He tells them they have no idea what they're talking about. The real problem, he says, is what's underneath. He tells them, dig. They dig, and they find a pool. He says, drain it. They drain it, and at the bottom, they find 2 hollow stones. And inside those stones are 2 sleeping dragons.
Sure enough, the dragons, one red, one white, burst out and begin to fight, which Merlin explains is a prophecy of a coming war between the Britons and the Saxons. Just like that, Merlin's incredible power is proven to everyone. So what does he do with this newfound fame? Well, later on, he's asked to build a memorial for a group of slain nobles. And his solution is pure Geoffrey of Monmouth. He uses his magic to transport the giant stones all the way from Ireland to build what we now know as Stonehenge. He literally gives a real-world wonder a magical origin story.
And that, of course, brings us to the main event, the absolute centerpiece of Geoffrey's entire book. Before this, Arthur was a pretty minor figure, maybe a warrior mentioned here and there in a few Welsh texts. But Geoffrey? He takes that tiny seed of a character and grows it into the most famous, most enduring legend in British history.
Arthur's origin story itself is just dripping with magic and deception. The king Uther Pendragon sees Gergerna, the beautiful wife of his rival, and falls into this desperate, all-consuming lust for her. He turns to Merlin for help, and Merlin comes up with a plan. He uses his magic to brew a potion that disguises Uther to look exactly like Gergerna's husband. That very night, while the real duke is killed in a surprise attack, Uther walks into the castle, gets into bed with Gergerna, and from that single night of magic and trickery, Arthur is conceived.
Now, Geoffrey's Arthur isn't just a clever king. He's a warrior of almost godlike power. In this one pivotal battle against the Saxons, his army is on the verge of total collapse. So Arthur draws his sword, Celeburn, which is the original name for Excalibur, and he charges into the fray. Geoffrey tells us that in that one charge, Arthur single-handedly cuts down 470 enemy soldiers. This isn't history anymore. This is the birth of a superhero.
So, after finally defeating the Saxons and securing Britain, Arthur gets to work building his kingdom. He marries the beautiful Guinevere, who Geoffrey says is descended from a noble Roman family and is the most stunning woman on the entire island. Their marriage is a huge deal. It's not just a wedding, it's a symbol that the wars are over. It represents the return of peace, order, and a brand new golden age of civilization.
And the way Geoffrey describes Arthur's court, wow. It's just designed to completely blow you away. He writes about this incredible feast where kings and dukes from all over Europe, we're talking Norway, Gaul, you name it, they all come to pay their respects. And the city itself, Caerleon, is described as having these incredible palaces with gilded roofs. He's deliberately making it sound like it was even more spectacular and wealthy than ancient Rome itself.
The arc of his reign is just breathtaking. He doesn't just stop at uniting Britain. Oh no, he becomes an emperor. First, he conquers Ireland, Iceland, and all the northern islands. Then he crosses the English Channel and takes over all of Gaul, what we now call France. He's literally on his way to march on Rome itself when he gets this terrible, terrible news from back home. His own nephew, Mordred, has betrayed him, seized his kingdom, and taken his queen. Arthur has to turn back for one final tragic battle.
And this just shows you the kind of cultural impact Geoffrey was inventing for Arthur. His court becomes the blueprint for chivalry. Geoffrey writes that the women of the court would only give their love to a man who had proven himself in battle at least 3 times. He says this ideal became so famous that nobles all over the world started dressing like Arthur's knights and copying their manners. See? He didn't just write a story about a king, he created the very idea of knighthood.
So after going through all these incredible, epic tales, we had to kind of step back and just ask ourselves, what did Geoffrey of Monmouth actually create here? He called it a history, but it was clearly something else entirely, wasn't it?
Here's the bottom line. As a true factual history book, Geoffrey's work is a complete failure. Historians, even back in his own day, pretty much dismissed it as fiction. But as a piece of myth-making, it is one of the most successful and influential books ever written. It gave a nation that was feeling defeated a glorious, heroic past to believe in. It gave them King Arthur. And that single gift would go on to shape Britain's identity for the next 1,000 years.
And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Geoffrey of Monmouth is a powerful reminder that sometimes the stories we tell about ourselves, about where we come from, can be more powerful than the cold, hard facts. These stories can shape our values, our dreams, and our whole sense of who we are. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In the long run, which has a bigger impact on the world? A history that's true, or a story that truly inspires a nation?